The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windshield. Another long day was ending, or perhaps just beginning, depending on how you looked at it. I, Detective Patrick Nolan, felt the familiar ache in my shoulders. The rain fell steadily, a gloomy soundtrack to my thoughts. I just wanted to go home. My old sedan pulled up to the grand iron gates of the Wallace mansion. Even in the pouring rain, its size was impressive, almost intimidating. Several police cars were already there, their blue and red lights flashing rhythmically. They painted the wet pavement with an urgent, unsettling glow. This was definitely not going to be a quiet night. Inside, the mansion's study was lavish, filled with dark wood and leather-bound books. Detective Sharon Foster was already there, her intelligent green eyes scanning the room. She wore her usual professional pantsuit. She saw me and gestured towards a large empty space above an unlit stone fireplace. "Looks like a big one, Patrick," she said quietly.
Leonard Wallace, the owner, was a man who enjoyed drama. He wrung his hands, his voice trembling with exaggerated despair. "My sunrise over the dale," he cried, pointing at the empty wall. "A priceless masterpiece, gone, stolen from my very home." Sharon and I exchanged a look. We had seen this act many times. I ignored Wallace's performance and focused on the scene. My eyes scanned the room, searching for anything out of place. Then I saw it. On the polished hardwood floor near the fireplace lay an ornate, gilded gold frame. It was heavy, intricately carved, and completely empty. The thieves had taken the painting but left the frame. I put on a fresh pair of gloves and carefully ran my finger along the frame's edge. It felt surprisingly smooth. There was no dust, no smudges, no obvious fingerprints. It was too clean, almost perfectly so. For a rushed robbery of a priceless item, this seemed odd. A knot of suspicion began to form in my gut.
Back at the precinct, Sharon and I reviewed the case file. The theft was unusual. "No forced entry, no alarms triggered," Sharon stated, looking at her tablet. The security system was sophisticated, but somehow bypassed. We compared the methods to known criminals, but nothing matched. This thief was different, or perhaps not a thief at all. Despite the lack of obvious clues, that empty frame kept bothering me. Its perfect cleanliness, the way it was left behind. It felt like a deliberate act, not an oversight. I picked up the phone. "Send the frame to the lab," I told the forensics technician. "I want a full, detailed analysis, every millimeter." A few days later, my phone rang. It was the forensics technician. His voice was calm, but I detected a hint of excitement. "Detective Nolan," he began, "we found something on the canvas backing inside that frame. Something quite unusual, almost invisible to the naked eye." My heart picked up its pace. I was at the lab within the hour. The technician pulled up a magnified image on a large computer screen. On the stark white canvas backing, barely visible, was a tiny, elegant signature. It read V.A. My mind immediately went to one name, a name I hadn't thought of in years: Vincent Adler. Sharon worked with quiet efficiency. She cross-referenced the tiny initials from the frame with art databases and criminal records. The screen glowed, reflecting in her intelligent green eyes. Then she got a hit. The name was Vincent Adler, a master forger known for his audacious talent. We pulled up Adler's old file. It was thick, filled with details of his past crimes. But there was a problem, a big one. According to the official records, Vincent Adler had been reported dead 5 years ago. The news hit us like a cold wave. It made no sense. I studied a grainy photo of Adler from the file. His eyes were intense, dark, almost burning.
A wild mane of white hair framed a gaunt face. He looked arrogant, proud, like a man who knew his own genius. It was the face of an artist, not just a criminal. He seemed to challenge me from the faded print. Despite the official report, we decided to treat the case as if Adler was still alive. The empty frame was too specific to be a coincidence. Our first step was to visit an old associate of his. We needed to find out if anyone else believed he was still out there. We had to follow every lead. We found Mr. Philip Dunn, an art gallery owner, in his dimly lit office. He was a nervous man, fidgeting with his tie. He admitted knowing Adler, although he seemed reluctant to speak. His eyes darted around, avoiding our gaze. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension. After some gentle persuasion, Dunn finally admitted the truth. He said Adler was obsessed. He wanted to prove he was better than the original artists he forged. Adler hated being in the shadows, always just a copy. He wanted recognition for his own genius, not just for mimicking others. A thought struck me then, sharp and clear. What if the stolen painting was not the real target at all? What if it was a message from Adler announcing his return, or perhaps something more profound? The empty frame suddenly felt like a challenge, not just an absence. Sharon, always thorough, dug deeper into the history of Sunrise Over the Dale. She found something interesting. Leonard Wallace had only discovered it 7 years ago. It was a relatively recent acquisition for such an old, famous piece. She cross-referenced the dates meticulously. The timeline was suspicious. 7 years ago, Wallace found the painting. That was just before Adler supposedly died 5 years ago. 2 years difference? It was too close to be a coincidence. A cold shiver ran down my spine. My mind raced, connecting the pieces. I theorized that the stolen painting was not the original Sunrise Over the Dale. What if it was a forgery? A masterpiece made by Adler himself years ago? And now he had simply reclaimed his own work. It was a bold thought, but it felt right. Sharon had found the small, almost invisible mark. It was on the empty canvas backing inside the frame. We realized it was Adler's hidden signature, a tiny detail only he would know. This mark was the final piece of the puzzle. It proved the painting was a forgery and that Adler was involved. Therefore, we decided to confront Leonard Wallace with our new theory. He had lied to us from the start. We were determined to get the truth from him. We drove back to the Wallace mansion. The study felt colder this time, the silence heavier. Wallace was waiting, looking calm, but his eyes were watchful. Sharon placed a photograph of the empty frame's backing on his desk. "Mr. Wallace," I began, "we know the painting was a forgery." His soft face hardened. He became visibly angry, his voice rising in defense. "That's impossible," he shouted, his composure breaking. Sharon stepped forward, holding a tablet. "We also found this, Mr. Wallace," she said calmly. "Financial records show a large, untraceable payment." She paused, letting the words sink in. "It was made from your account just before you found the painting." Wallace's face went pale. He tried to interrupt, but Sharon continued. "The money went to an offshore account, but we linked it to Vincent Adler." Wallace's perfect composure finally broke. He slumped into a nearby armchair, defeated. His voice was barely a whisper. "Yes," he confessed, "I hired Adler." He looked up, his eyes full of shame. "I wanted a masterpiece, a painting that would make me famous. I thought it would increase my own fame, my legacy." The room was silent, except for Wallace's ragged breathing. Wallace continued, his voice shaking. "Adler contacted me recently.
He demanded more money, a lot more. I listened, my mind piecing together the events. When I refused, he threatened to expose me. Wallace looked at me, fear in his eyes. He said he would tell everyone the painting was a fake. His words painted a clear picture of Adler's motive. It all made sense now. Adler hadn't just created a forgery, he had created a masterpiece. He was a brilliant artist, but his ego was even bigger. The theft was Adler's way of getting revenge on Wallace. It was also his twisted way of proving his genius. He didn't just steal a painting, he stole his own work. He wanted the world to know what he was capable of without giving Wallace credit. It was a signature move indeed. Wallace, now completely broken, was cooperative. He pulled out a small leather-bound address book. Adler has a secluded cabin, he mumbled, pointing to an entry. He used it as a studio, a place where he could work undisturbed. Sharon quickly wrote down the address. Wallace looked at us, his eyes pleading. Please, just make this go away. His fear was palpable. The sun was setting as we left the city. Sharon drove, her hands steady on the wheel. We drove through a dense forest, the trees tall and dark. The road was narrow and winding, leading deeper into the woods. Silence filled the car, heavy with anticipation. Each mile brought us closer to Adler and to the truth. The air grew colder, and a sense of tension filled the small space. After what felt like hours, we saw it. A small, isolated wooden cabin nestled deep among the trees. It looked old, almost forgotten. A soft, muted yellow light glowed from a single window. It was a stark contrast to the encroaching darkness. We parked the car some distance away and approached on foot. Every step was cautious, every sound amplified in the quiet forest. We pushed the creaking wooden door open. Inside, the air smelled of turpentine and old wood. Vincent Adler was there, just as we expected. He sat calmly at an easel, a half-finished painting on the canvas. He didn't look up immediately. When he finally did, his intense, dark eyes met ours. He didn't seem surprised to see us. It was as if he had been waiting. Vincent Adler slowly put down his fine brush. He looked at me, his eyes tired but still holding a spark. "Yes, Detective Nolan," he said, his voice quiet. "I did it. Wallace's greed was an insult to my art. He only cared about money, not the beauty." His confession was calm, almost proud. Adler then gestured towards a canvas leaning against a far wall. "The stolen painting," he announced, a hint of boastfulness in his tone. It was Sunrise Over the Dale, perfectly reproduced. Every brushstroke, every color was exact. It was a masterpiece of forgery, so good it was almost art itself. My jaw tightened as I saw the skill involved. I looked around the small, cluttered studio. On a dusty workbench, I saw his tools. There was a worn, dark brown leather tool roll, unrolled to show fine-tipped brushes and tiny glass jars. Magnifying glasses of different strengths lay next to delicate scalpels. It was Adler's forging kit. This was how he had done it, with such precision. Adler turned to Sharon, who had been quietly observing. "I never intended to hurt anyone, Detective Foster," he said softly. "I only wanted the truth to be known. Wallace had disrespected art, and I had to correct it. He thought he owned beauty, but beauty belongs to everyone." His voice held a deep conviction, a sense of justified action. Then, as a final act of defiance, Adler leaned closer to me. The real sunrise over the dale was never truly lost, Detective, he whispered, a triumphant smile on his face. My heart pounded. It's safe, hidden in plain sight, where only a true artist would think to look. I will tell you where it is. He had won in his own way. Later that day, the police arrived at Leonard Wallace's mansion. He stood in his lavish study, surrounded by his expensive books and dark wood. 2 officers, Robert and James, placed him under arrest. Wallace's face was a mask of shock and disbelief. His cultured air had vanished, replaced by pure, raw fear. Justice, it seemed, had finally arrived. Back at his cabin, Vincent Adler was calmly led away in handcuffs. He looked at me as he passed, a quiet contentment on his face. He had achieved his goal, even if it meant prison. He had exposed Wallace and saved the true art. It was a bittersweet ending for a man who loved art more than freedom. He walked away, his head held high. Following Adler's precise instructions, our team located the original Sunrise Over the Dale. It was hidden in a secure storage unit, disguised within a crate of old forgotten canvases. The moment we saw it, there was no doubt. The true masterpiece, vibrant and alive, was finally recovered. It was a significant victory for the art world. Days later, Sharon and I stood in a quiet evidence room. Before us, side by side, were the original Sunrise Over the Dale and Adler's perfect forgery. It was almost impossible to tell them apart. We looked from one to the other, marveling at Adler's skill. It was a strange feeling, seeing such beauty born from a crime. I walked over to the empty frame, now tagged as evidence. I touched its gilded edge, feeling the cool metal. This case wasn't about money, not really. It was about pride. Adler's pride in his art, Wallace's pride in his false wealth. The empty frame was a symbol of that clash. A forger's signature, indeed.
Es momento de la trivia. Te haré 2 preguntas sobre la historia que acabas de escuchar. Piensa bien las respuestas y déjalas en los comentarios. Pregunta número 1. ¿Qué herramientas específicas observó el detective Nolan en el estudio de Vincent Adler? Tómate tu tiempo para pensar. Pregunta número 2. ¿Qué reveló Vincent Adler sobre el cuadro original después de su confesión? Esas son las 2 preguntas de nuestra trivia. No olvides dejar tus respuestas en los comentarios. Me encanta leer lo que piensan sobre las historias.
Si te gustó el video, pon me gusta, suscríbete y activa la campanita para ver más historias.